If you can fix that beast of a Caterpillar 797F, I'll pay you $100,000. Serafina's words cut cleanly through the freezing wind, sharper than the steel girders rising from the mining site. The massive haul truck loomed behind her like a fallen titan, its yellow paint dulled by years of punishment, hauling mountains of rock, iron, and earth without complaint. Tonight, though, it sat dead just yards from the export gate, blocking the only path forward. The irony was brutal. A machine designed to move 400 tons of stone now carried something far more fragile and far more important: emergency medical equipment, ventilators, oxygen modules, air filtration systems, machines that determined whether people would live or suffocate slowly in hospital beds hundreds of miles away. Carter adjusted the strap of Bonnie's backpack on his shoulder. His hands were stained with grease that had worked deep into the creases of his palms, and beneath his fingernails, permanent reminders of a life spent keeping other people alive by keeping machines honest. His eyes flicked back to the glowing countdown timer on his phone. 2 hours and 17 minutes. That was how long they had before the weather windows slammed shut. 2 hours and 17 minutes to haul the cargo across 43 miles of mining roads that would become completely impassable once the full force of the blizzard hit. After that, no trucks, no helicopters, no second chances. Behind them, Clinton laughed. It was the kind of laugh meant to humiliate rather than amuse, loud and performative, delivered for an audience. He stood with his arms crossed, flanked by a small cluster of workers who fed off his authority like parasites clinging to a host. A single dad trying to fix a 797F? Clinton said, shaking his head, "This ought to be good. Maybe he'll ask the truck nicely, and it'll just start working again." The group snickered as they walked off, their mockery echoing across the frozen ground. Carter didn't look at them. He crouched low instead, pressing his ear close to the engine block. The wind howled across the open site, but Carter filtered out instinctively. His body went still, entering the deep practice focus that came from years of training, years of learning that machines spoke their own language, not in words but in vibrations, in frequencies, in the subtle tremors that told stories of stress, fatigue, and imminent failure. For nearly 30 seconds, he stayed there, unmoving. His breath formed small clouds in the bitter air. His expression revealed nothing. Then he stood. Everyone nearby felt it before he spoke. The shift in certainty, the weight of his presence. "Everyone needs to step back," Carter said quietly. "If anyone tries to start this engine right now, it's going to blow." Silence followed. The remote mining operation sprawled across the desolate landscape like an open wound carved into the earth. Under normal conditions, it operated 24 hours a day, its floodlights turning night into a harsh orange imitation of daylight. Diesel engines roared constantly, a sound so familiar it faded into the background. Tonight, that sound was gone. Most of the equipment sat idle, frozen and abandoned, the quiet broken only by the wind whistling through skeletal processing structures. This was what the logistics team called a golden window, a narrow, unforgiving window of time where everything had to go exactly right. A respiratory virus outbreak had overwhelmed the regional hospital. Their existing equipment was failing. Dr. Chun, the head of critical care, had called Serafina personally 3 hours earlier. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had watched too many people die. 15 patients were already on failing ventilators. Without replacements, some wouldn't survive the night. With the main routes blocked by the storm, the convoy had no choice but to cut through the mining access road, using the Caterpillar 797F to handle the super-heavy load. The truck wasn't built for delicate cargo. It was built to dominate geology itself. Its tires stood 12 feet tall. Its engine generated over 3,000 horsepower. It existed to crush obstacles into submission, and now it sat silent. Carter was a contract heavy equipment mechanic, the kind permanent staff dismissively called a wrench monkey. He'd shown up tonight with his 7-year-old daughter, Bonnie, because he had no one else to watch her. School had closed early due to the storm. The babysitter he sometimes relied on had her own emergency. So Bonnie came with him, as she often did, a small presence in a world of massive machines and unforgiving danger. She sat bundled in the cab of Carter's battered pickup truck, her pink winter coat stretched tight as she grew out of it. Her inhaler rested in one mittened hand. Her wide eyes tracked the towering machinery, moving through the darkness. Carter had given her a tablet loaded with educational games and her favorite shows. He'd also given her strict instructions. Stay in the truck. Keep the doors locked. If you need me, flash the headlights 3 times. Carter spoke little, but when he worked, his movements carried purpose. He switched gloves depending on the task. Insulated, chemical-resistant, cut-resistant, never taking shortcuts. He locked out power sources in exact sequence, following proper procedures even when others skipped steps to save time. He positioned himself upwind when dealing with fuel or hydraulics, a habit learned the hard way. Those who paid attention noticed something else. Carter examined stress points the way someone who had seen catastrophic failure examined them. His eyes lingered on weld joints, pressure relief valves, where patterns on cables and hoses. He saw things others missed because he knew what failure looked like when it killed people. Serafina arrived in a black luxury SUV that looked absurdly out of place among the mud and machinery. The vehicle was spotless, gleaming under industrial lights. She stepped out with her assistant, Audrey, a woman in her late 20s juggling 2 phones, a tablet, and a laptop. Serafina was the CEO of the emergency logistics firm responsible for the shipment. Her reputation was built on ice and precision. She made decisions in minutes that others agonized over for days. She had climbed to the top by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone around her. Tonight, pressure came from every direction. The hospital needed the equipment immediately. The government contract carried penalty clauses charging $15,000 per minute for delays. Her board of directors was watching for a mistake that would justify removing her. 3 of them had opposed her appointment. They were waiting like hawks. Clinton, the mine's transfer operations manager, thrived in moments like this. He treated every interaction as a dominance contest and delighted in humiliating anyone without power. Contract workers, temporary staff, anyone expendable. Hillary, head of security and compliance, was already documenting everything. Her career was built on turning problems into someone else's fault. Flynn, the operator assigned to the 797F, stood nearby, pale and shaking. 12 years of experience, shaken by a failure that didn't make sense. Finn, a young apprentice mechanic barely 22, watched Carter with growing fascination. What he saw wasn't just repair, it was mastery. When the Caterpillar ground to a halt, Clinton made sure everyone heard him. "We've only got Carter," he announced, "and he's just a single dad play mechanic." Serafina checked her watch. "I don't have time for failure," she said flatly. She walked up to the base of the towering truck and looked Carter directly in the eyes. "If you can get it running to full load specifications," she said, $100,000. Clinton grinned and pulled out his phone, recording. Let's watch the single dad work his magic. Carter didn't react to the money. Instead, he asked questions. What exactly is the load carrying? Any temperature-sensitive modules? When was the last full maintenance on hydraulics, electrical, and air brake systems? Has anyone accessed the ECU compartment today? Serafina felt a flicker of surprise. This wasn't guesswork. This was diagnosis. Carter moved closer to the engine housing, his nose catching a faint acrid scent. He instructed Flynn to disengage the load, chalk the wheels, and isolate power properly. Hillary stepped in immediately. "You don't have authorization to open the control compartment." Carter's voice remained calm. "Then call the fire department and have them stand by," he said, "because this isn't a simple breakdown." Movement from the pickup truck caught Serafina's attention. Bonnie cracked open the door. "Daddy?" Carter turned, his expression softening for just a moment. He handed her noise-canceling headphones and pointed to the safety line. Bonnie obeyed without question. Serafina watched the exchange, something shifting inside her chest. Vulnerability, responsibility, love. Carter crouched again, listening. When he stood, his voice carried authority. "If we start this engine right now," he said, "it could explode." Clinton shoved forward, furious. "You're stalling," he snapped. "Flynn, start the engine." "That's an order." Flynn hesitated. Then he made the wrong choice. The ignition turned. A sharp crack echoed. Sparks flew. Smoke rose. A high-pressure line shuddered violently. Bonnie screamed. Carter moved instantly. He cut power, deployed fire suppression foam, barked commands that snapped everyone into motion. The danger passed. Smoke cleared. Serafina stepped forward, her voice no longer cold, now steel. From this moment on, she said, everyone follows Carter's instructions. Clinton fell silent. Inside the engine compartment, Carter found the truth. A sensor wire, cut cleanly. A mismatched bolt in the ECU housing. Evidence of deliberate tampering. He straightened and met Serafina's gaze. Someone sabotaged this truck, he said, and you need to decide whether you want to save the shipment or bury a scandal. Hillary was already building a narrative. Carter cut through it. I can fix this, he said, but you need to lock down this site and preserve all footage. If you don't, by tomorrow morning I'll be in jail for something I didn't do. Serafina looked at Bonnie, pressed against the truck window, just as balanced on the shoulders of a single father, and the clock was still ticking. The wind intensified as if the land itself were urging them to hurry. Carter didn't waste time arguing politics or blame. He moved with quiet urgency, outlining his plan in clipped, efficient sentences. He would work on two fronts at once. First, make the Caterpillar 797F safe enough to operate under full load within the shrinking weather window. Second, preserve every shred of evidence proving the truck had been deliberately sabotaged. Finn stayed glued to his side, passing tools before Carter even asked for them. He watched in awe as Carter called out specifications from memory, torque values, pressure tolerances, wiring paths, without once opening a manual. This wasn't just experience. This was design-level knowledge. Carter crawled beneath the chassis and reached into a narrow recess near the brake assembly. His hand emerged, holding a small black device. A tracker, he said, holding it up, commercial grade. Whoever planted it would know our position in real time. Audrey Cross immediately cross-referenced the serial number. Her face tightened. This unit was ordered through internal procurement, she said quietly. Purchase authorization signed by Hillary. The air changed. I don't need the $100,000, Carter said suddenly. The statement hit like a dropped wrench on steel. Everyone had assumed the money was a point. If this shipment makes it on time, he continued, transfer the full amount to a pediatric respiratory equipment fund. No publicity. No mention of my name. Serafina felt something crack open in her chest. I give you my word, she said. From the pickup, Bonnie's small voice carried through the night. Please don't challenge my daddy anymore. Serafina walked to the truck and knelt beside the door. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Carter returned to the 797F. Now we do this by the book, he told Flynn. One mistake, and we all die. The engine turned over with a thunderous rumble, vibrating the frozen ground. The truck lived again, but Carter's ear caught something wrong. A subtle harmonic irregularity. Controlled test run, he ordered. The first brake test confirmed it. Air brake systems compromised. Carter said instantly, slow leak or restriction. As the convoy prepared to roll, Carter spotted movement in his mirror. A pickup truck, license plates obscured, following too closely. He keyed the radio. George, we got a safety issue. Possible stalking behavior. The mining road became a gauntlet. Wind, dust, snow, darkness. Carter guided Flynn through every turn. Steady speed, engine compression, no sudden braking. The pickup struck. Metal debris slammed into a support wheel. Carter had anticipated this. He directed the convoy into a defensive pull-off, then slid beneath the truck again. Finn feeding him tools at lightning speed. This wasn't casual sabotage, Carter said, holding up a modified brake component. This was designed to kill us. Audrey's rapid checks exposed the pattern. Hillary authorized the tracker. Clinton pushed maintenance delays. Records altered. Inspection skipped. Carter looked at Serafina. A signature in a boardroom can become a coffin on a highway. George radioed in. We're detecting coordinated signal interference. Carter's voice dropped. Whoever did this is close to you. Then the truck vibrated again, deep resonant. I designed this system. Carter said before he could stop himself. Silence flooded the channel. The truth came out in fragments. Carter had once been a senior engineer. A braking system upgrade. A haul truck accident. His wife killed. Cost-cutting and deferred maintenance blamed no one. He left, raised Bonnie alone. Stayed invisible. The pickup returned, this time blocking the road. They're not here for the cargo, Carter said calmly. They're here to erase witnesses. Armed men emerged. Bonnie's breathing turned shallow. Serafina pulled the child against her, shielding her instinctively. Carter stepped forward, hands raised. They tackled him. Zip ties snapped tight. Hillary arrived with perfect timing. Carter sabotaged equipment, she declared. He's being detained. Clinton produced edited footage. He extorted money, then destroyed the truck. The lie was clean, efficient, deadly. Bonnie clutched Serafina's coat. You said you believed my daddy. Serafina made her choice. Call William, she told Audrey. Preserve everything. Burn this down. Evidence poured in. Emails, logs, tool marks, procurement trails. Finn testified. George traced the pickup. Carter, zip-tie but calm, directed the investigation like a conductor guiding an orchestra. When Clinton and Hillary tried to redirect the cargo, Carter broke free, Finn deliberately looking the other way, and secured a load with lockout codes only he knew. It's impossible to transfer now, Carter said flatly. George arrested them both. The Caterpillar 797 F-rolled again. This time, it made it. The hospital received the equipment minutes before lockdown. Flynn wept. Serafina watched the truck disappear into dawn. You didn't just fix a machine, she said. You saved lives. Will you admit your company failed? Carter asked. Yes, she said, publicly. She did. The fallout was brutal. The truth held. Clinton and Hillary faced charges. The donation funded pediatric ventilators. Carter's name stayed off it. Bonnie held the receipt. My daddy fixed a giant truck so little kids could breathe. Carter hugged her. He was offered a role with one condition: protect the workers. Accepted. 3 days later, Serafina knelt in a hospital parking lot. Thank you for reminding me promises matter, she told Bonnie. They do. Bonnie said seriously. The storm passed. Snow covered the mine. The Caterpillar sat repaired and silent, not conquered, corrected. Carter walked forward with his daughter's hand in his. Seen, respected, enough. He always had been.